Mr. Edit Man presents Who is the stranger that you have only seen/meet once in your life that you still think about time to time? 1986. A year after graduating from a tiny college on Idaho, I was at Disneyland with a high school buddy. I was totally convinced that I saw a college friend, Adam, in line at Pirates of the Caribbean. I kept waving at him, but he looked at me like I was out of my mind. My high school friend tried to talk me down, saying that Adam clearly had no idea who I was. It's not him. Everyone has a twin. Yada. 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 The line finally snakes around to where I'm standing right next to Adam, so I tap him on the shoulder and ask, "Hey, Aaron, not you Adam N?" And he says no, him his twin brother Aaron. 34 years later, and I still tell that story at parties. I only met Aaron once, in 1986, in line at Pirates, but I do wish him and Adam a very happy birthday on Facebook. An old man I overheard telling his grandkids that if their dad got accepted to the job he was interviewing for in town, they would move there and then they could visit each other all the time. I never even saw the guy interviewing for the job, but I really hope he got it. I met my husband's doppelganger once. The man looked exactly like my husband. I was with someone at the hospital waiting for their medical transport to pick us up, and I saw who I thought was my husband across the street. My husband was supposed to be at work, so I was confused. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. My patient and I walked over to him, but I stopped short a few feet away because I started to realize maybe it wasn't actually him. His clothes were different and this man was assisting someone in caregiving type role. My husband absolutely would not do that. The guy noticed me staring at him, and so I explained why and even showed him a picture of my husband. He swore that was a picture of him and this was all some practical joke. I had to show him pictures of my husband and I together for him to realize the pictures were not of him. This man could have been his identical twin. I often think of that encounter and how insane it was. I also think of the astronomical chances that not only did my husband have a doppelganger, but that we lived in the same city for a while and I happened to cross paths with him. I was once approached by a woman in a supermarket who told me, "Oh, so you're the one that people say looks like my son." I was kinda confused and weirded out, but she explained that numerous of her friends had told her about this guy around town that looks exactly like your son. I live in a relatively small city, less than 10,000 people. She did not show me a picture or anything, but I still live in the city and still keep my eye out for my fabled doppelganger, so that one day we may fight to the death. My husband is friends with his doppelganger. At our wedding everyone assumed they were brothers, despite his actual brother being a groomsman. At the rehearsal dinner I was at the far side of the aisle as my wedding coordinator called out some instructions to the groomsmen at the end of aisle. I noticed my husband was cutting up with his buddy instead of listening, so I was like, "Husband," in that exasperated voice. I said his actual name, but as soon as it came out of my mouth I realized I was fussing at his friend. His friend did not notice, but my husband, who was paying attention, sure did. It was very disorienting. I was far enough away for it to be shrugged off. During the wedding one of my little nephews got hurt and went crying to my husband, but it was really his friend. Confusion ensued. He did not know who this crying child was, but they both figured it out pretty quickly. The adult friend thought it was hilarious. My poor nephew backed away slowly and never spoke of it again. This friend lives far enough away that was the only time we met, but it sure is funny to see photos of them together from when they were younger, before I met my husband, because it can be hard to tell. There are a few giveaways if you know what to look for, but if the photo is poor quality, they look the same. Years ago when I worked at Lowe's, a customer told me in great detail about how he fell through a rotting deck, but landed with a joist between his legs and had to go to the dick doctor. Not a complete stranger, but a classmate in my first year at uni. We shared some classes, but did not really spoke to each other beside the casual greetings. One morning she got a call on her cell phone, came back to the classroom visibly upset to gather her things and left. I never saw her again after that. Still think randomly about it sometimes, 14 years later. That reminds me of a time in college when a classmate of mine just started crying out of nowhere during a lecture. It was very noticeable since she sat at the front of the class near the professor. So everyone looked on awkwardly since we did not know what was going on. I did not know or talk to her, but I later found out from other classmates that she was not doing too well in the class and it was her third time retaking the course. So the stress built up and she had a panic attack, given that repeating a course more than 3 times got you out of a program. She eventually calmed down and left the classroom. but to this day I still wonder whether she passed the class or not, especially considering that the final exam was very difficult. I hope she's doing okay. It's still something I think about every now and then since it's the only time that's happened in a class. Once I was walking to work past a homeless shelter pickup spot. It was a sunny day, middle of summer. A small lady was standing on the sidewalk wearing rain boots, a yellow raincoat, and wrapped completely in a blue vinyl tarp. As I walked by her, she leaned into me, looked me in the eye and said, fish monster ... I still think about her. Did she think I was a fish monster? Was she concerned that I had seen a fish monster? Perhaps she felt I was unprepared, and her questioning tone was more about if I'd heard about the potential of fish monsters. Such a surreally complex interaction in just 2 words. One thing I know for certain is that whatever the fish monster status was, she was clearly the best prepared of everyone present. When I was fresh out of college I drove over 2 hours away for a job interview and got into a car accident like a block away from the building. My car was completely totaled. A woman who was stopped at the stop sign near my accident pulled over and got out to make sure I was okay. I was completely fine physically, but had very bad anxiety and immediately had a panic attack. I was sobbing and cold not to catch my breath and this complete stranger sat with me the entire time telling me to breathe and just being so caring and supportive. She waited with me for the police to come. She helped me talk them through what happened. She called my mom for me. She even called the office I was on my way to, so she could let them know about the accident and that I would call them to reschedule my interview. As if that was not enough, once she found out that I was that far away from home and it was going to take my mom 2 hours to get to me, she cancelled her meeting that she was already late to so she could drive me halfway. She did not think it was a big deal whatsoever. She just stepped up to the plate to help without question. I would have been completely alone and lost without her that day. She was an angel. Honestly, I lost her business card between all the paperwork from the accident and I have been kicking myself over it for the last 5 years. All I want is to call her and tell her how thankful I am and that I have kept her in my thoughts ever since. Roxanne, if you're out there, thank you so much. And please for the love of God send me your last name so I can send you some flowers. Honor her by paying it forward. At some point in your life you're going to see a person in need. In that moment, you have the power to be their Roxanne. I was in a crash last summer, pancaked between a Hummer and another SUV. Like you, nobody was physically hurt, but I was definitely stunned and in shock. And I remember people seemed to materialize out of nowhere to help. Somebody called the police. One woman came over, told us she was a nursing student, and gave the kids a quick check before the first responders got there. Another woman was yelling at the kid in the Hummer and making sure he did not do anything sketchy. It was a horrid situation, but it was kind of nice to know that people jumped right in and were willing to help. A little over a year ago I had just started studying abroad in Japan and got into an accident with my bike. Did not speak one word Japanese. I did not know how severe it was at first, but I was unable to stand or walk. Some people tried to help me, including this one middle-aged woman. A younger girl who was also there and spoke a little English said I had to go to the hospital just in case, but said I should not call an ambulance cause that would be expensive. I waited for a long time on the sidewalk while this middle-aged woman called her friend with a car. They took me to the hospital. She bought me one of those warm milky coffees from the vending machines and held my hand the entire time until the nurses took me to check out my wounds. We did not exchange a single word other than me repeatedly saying arigato cause. That was all I knew how to say. Once I got out of surgery a few hours later she was gone. But I still think about her from time to time. It amazes me how much she went out of her way for a complete stranger who did not even speak the same language. The memory still warms my heart. I wish I could have thanked her more. When I was a kid, I flew by myself for the first time. At the airport, when I was about to check in, I spotted an elderly lady looking at me deeply. At first I thought I accidentally hit her or something, so I asked if she needed anything. She nodded, did not give it much importance, so I just checked in and headed to my plane. Later, already on the plane, I see the very same lady looking for her seat. Of course I helped her and asked her what number her seat was. She handed me her ticket. B37. I'll never forget it because I was the C37. She sat right next to me. I was scared. I was a kid and I was not used to coincidences. Anyway, long flight. When we arrived and were waiting for the plane to land for us to head out, she finally says, "You know, you really look like my daughter. I even thought you were her, but she passed away 5 years ago. Silly me. Here, This is her with my grandkids. She handed me her phone with a zoomed in picture. I was paralyzed when I saw her. She looked exactly like me, but she was 28 and I was 10. I could not even talk. Now that I am older, every time I look in the mirror for my birthday, I remember that lady in the picture. I'm a living photo of her daughter. Every year that goes by is a year that I look more like that woman in the picture when I turn 28. I hope this memory will finally scare me less. Weird and cool altogether. When I was 10, I moved to a new school right around the same time. Another girl, also 10, started there too. Never met before. Did not know each other's families. Nothing we could connect. She was named what my mother was originally going to name me, which was weird. We were identical. Height, weight, glasses, eyes, build, voice, you name it. We were so identical that not only did the teachers get us confused, but our mothers could not tell us apart at first glance. My mother went to the school one day, saw me, and started talking about something or other. Later she talked to me again, but I had no idea what she was talking about. Turns out she had talked to the other girl without knowing it was not her daughter. We were friends instantly. It was kinda fun after the creepiness wore off. Fun twist. She and her family ended up moving down the street 6 years later without knowing where we had moved to. When I was in Iraq in 2003, we were partnered with some local police. Their compound was a secure area, and no unauthorized people were allowed in. There was this little girl, probably about 7-9 years old, that sold bananas and was allowed in or out whenever she wanted. I hope she's doing well. When I was young, maybe 5, my mom got really sick and was screaming in pain as she drove me and herself to the hospital. No one else was with us. When we got there, she passed out in the car. I ran up to the hospital and got a wheelchair. She managed to somehow flop herself into the chair and passed out again. The hospital was uphill, and I was too weak to push her. She was too heavy. A stranger came out of nowhere, wheeled her in, and made enough ruckus to get her immediate attention. She spent the next 2 months in the hospital. I never saw that guy again, but I think about him all the time and did like to thank him one day. I was doing last minute Father's Day shopping with my son for my husband. There was a young lady in the card section crying full on. Broken hearted, ugly crying. I looked at her and thought, poor thing. I hope she's okay. We finished our shopping, line up to check out, and she was still there. She's pick up a card, look at it, burst into fresh tears, put it back, then compose herself and lose it all over again. By now my heart was breaking for her, so I sent my son off to grab a box of chocolates. We bought our stuff and waited just outside for her. When she came out, I grabbed the chocks, approached her and said, I do not know what's going on and it's none of my business, but I got these for you. I promise things will get better. She burst into tears, grabbed me in a hug, and said my dad died 2 days ago. Anyway, longish story short, we sat down and she told me about her dad and how she wanted to put a Father's Day card in his coffin with the present she'd gotten him and all the things people need to say when someone they love dies suddenly. We went our separate ways when she saw how late it was, and honestly, to this day I do not know if I'd recognize her, even if I bumped into her again. But I have always wondered how she made it through her first Father's Day without her dad, and how she's doing now. I haven't not told anyone but my husband this story before, and I'm only sharing it now on the random chance she reads it and remembers us and I can find out how she's doing. I was having a rough day and I thought I'd get an ice cream to cheer myself up. I was standing in the line and this old lady looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and just had a rough day. I got up to the front to get my ice cream and she tells the cashier, I have got this young man has had a rough day. She smiles at me and says, enjoy your ice cream. I still think of her whenever I have a rough day. I send her my good vibes. I was on my way back from Disneyland Paris. Sat in the airport and a guy beside me was typing away on his laptop. A little curious at what he was writing, I peeked over and saw the title, the last letter Leverite. I was frozen for a few minutes. I'm 24 and I had absolutely no idea what to do. I thought maybe he was a writer and if I ask he'll look stupid. Eventually though I turned round to him and said, look man, I really hope I'm making a fool of myself, but are you okay? Turns out he and his long-term partner had broken up and they were meant to be coming on this holiday that had now come on with his dad. He blamed himself and had been going to therapy for a while to get out of a pretty dark place, but some days were better than others, and writing the letters was an exercise from his therapist. We chatted for a bit about her, his dad, me, life in general. Turned out his brother lived nearby me and frequented a coffee shop right by where I used to live. Eventually my plane got called and we hugged, and I told him I really hope things get better for him and that at the very least it had a lovely time talking to him. We left there and I still wonder what happened to him. I hope he's happy now. I hope that has managed to find some good in the world again. But I guess I'll never know for sure. I once saw my exact double in a Barnes & Noble. We saw each other from a far distance, locked eyes, gave a slow head nod to each other, and kept going without saying a word. Sometimes I wonder how he is doing. I never met my double, but he hates me. I was on a train one night and a girl came up to me like, "Hey Brian, how have you been?" And I was like, "What? I'm not Brian ... Then she mentioned this dude's last name like, "Ah, Brian ... You're always a dick," and laughed it off and left. I Facebooked this guy and it was my exact double ... I friend requested him like, "Yo, isn't this funny?" And he was just a dick. Until my most recent car. I have always driven old junkers that somehow managed to get me to and from work. And bless them for it. But for this memory, my metallic orange 1996 Chevy Corsica was bottoming out the brakes when I was stopped too long at lights and would shut down entirely. I drifted off to the side, called my parents and job to let them know what was going on, and just had to wait for help to show. There was no shoulder for me to pull into, and cars were whizzing past fast enough to shake my car, which I was sweating to death inside of because of course none of my cars had AC. I watched the cars go by, see about 2 cop cars come and go without so much as a pause, which is weird given where I was stuck and with my hazards going too. But whatever, it's Jersey. I'm not expecting much, besides a ticket. An undercover car pulls up behind me and a sweet middle-aged guy asks what's up. I'll let him know I'm just waiting on help to push the car to the other side of the road at least, since there's a shoulder there. He has me hop out and make sure that there really isn't not any way to move it without some extra muscle, and lets me come hang in his car so I can at least catch some air. I leave the door cracked just to be safe, but has nice about it all. He has the lights inside going and the radio is crackling things I barely understand, but seemed legit enough. Turns out has not police, but disaster relief. And tells me all about how he helped out when Sandy hit, and also how he noticed the cops drive on past without even checking in, and how he'll be reporting them for it. Super chill dude. I had to ask why, if has just disaster relief. Did he stop by? And he just mentioned that he would hope someone would do the same for his daughter. Eventually my help shows up, and it's all settled, and I thanked him about 100+ times. But I still think about him, and it warms my heart to remember that people do things just to be nice sometimes, too. I was 16 and was having a crappy day, but I had a couple bucks and went to a McDonald's. I was at a table for 2, but there were not any other seats left. So this older woman asked if she could sit with me. Found out that at 16 she had run away and a convent took her in exchange for chores until she got married. Then her husband died some years later. They had no kids and she did not have any family left. So she went back and struck the same deal. I'm in my 30s now and it still amazes me how peaceful she was when I remember her. Dave. I swear I think about Dave every week. I was hosting at a family Italian restaurant and it was packed. We had a spaghetti meatball promotion where it was like 1/2 off the menu price. Dine in and take out. Dave asks for a table and we tell him the wait. Something like 45 minutes for a 2-top. And my co-host asks him for his name. To which he replies, "If I give you my name, what will people call me by?" Like actual bonkers response. But he keeps going and cracking jokes left and right and tries to guess my co-host's name, but weirdly guesses my name. Anyways, he's waiting and this other guy comes up and asks if another table would mind if he sat down with them. We told him that we could not do that and he offers to sing for them. Once again, no. After a while we seat Dave and the evening is smooth sailing. It's slowing down and I'm helping the busser clean out a few booths when I hear some traditional Italian singing, like almost operatic. It's Dave and his dad. They are singing to the people at the table next to them. I will never forget Dave. Never. I met a man at a Wendy's at like 9:55 at night while I was working at Books A Million. I was 19 years old, starving, and had 30 minutes to get in, scarf down a small burger, and get back. The man came out, introduced himself as Mr. Lemonade, and informed me that he was off his meds. Then he left, wherever Mr. Lemonade is now. I hope he's well and back on his meds. You have made it until the end of this video. Now listen here, and listen here closely. Like and subscribe for more videos by me, Mr. Reddit Man. Thanks for watching.